And we're kind of leading into complement because we've been talking about sort of the effector functions of antibodies. And now one of the functions of antibodies is to activate the so-called classical pathway for complement production. This was the first one discovered. It certainly plays an important role, but probably even more important or equally important are the two other pathways here, which are part of innate immunity. So we have complement functioning to fight the infection from the earliest moments of the start of the infection. This is sort of the cavalry coming over the crest of the hill to polish off the defeated enemy. These all feed into the production of a protein called a cleaved protein. We take the C3 component of complement of the blood, of the tissue plasma, and we cleave it to make a big piece called C3b and a small piece called C3a. By the way, the general rule is whenever you cleave these complement components, C2, C4, and so on, the big piece is called B and the small piece is called A. There's one exception. In the early days of the discoveries here, somebody named the big piece the A part. The terminal confusion of students thereafter. And our book has kind of, in different issues, has gone back and forth between keeping the idea that the big piece is called the B fragment, and or so. I mean, if you hear me talking about it, I'm always going to refer to the big pieces as the B part, but sometimes I may make a mistake in this one particular thing called B. I'll try not to confuse you. Anyway, this big piece called C3b has a highly reactive strained peptide bond structure, and that will react with any nucleophile. And the surface of cells is covered with proteins, or the amino groups of proteins are nucleophilic and carboxyl groups are nucleophilic. So that the C3b part that gets bound to the surface of it. I mean, complement just rains down reactive C3b on all your cells, all the incoming pathogenic cells, everybody gets C3b all over their surface, okay? We have, on our own cells, we have ways of kind of neutralizing that C3b. Bacteria don't. So that in bacteria, that C3b is covering their surface, and the macrophages have these complement receptors that bind to the C3b, and that's why bacteria are opsonized. So bacteria are opsonized by antibodies, but also opsonized by C3b fragments all over their surface, and then so macrophages engulf them. The small pieces are inflammatory cytokines, okay, and participate in fighting and causing inflammation. And C3b can then also initiate the formation of what's called the protein attack complex, or the POR complex. Other components of complement, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, form these oligomeric hole punching structures that just cause they're huge structures. Whole proteins just pass through them, and the whole cell just osmotically bursts. Form these pore structures all over the surface of the bacteria or infected cell or whatever. This little table here, it kind of talks about some of the key components of complement. We'll start off talking about C1, and there are several subunits that we speak of subunit. We speak of C1q, C1r, C1s complex. C1q binds to IgM that's on the surface of a bacterium. Okay. So IgM activates C1q. Closely spaced other immunoglobulins can also activate it, but this is the activator par excellence of the C1 community. C1q, here are its subunit proteins here. And then cleave C4b and C3b. C3 and C4 are cleaved in this process. These pieces, both C3 and C4, have this highly reactive amino acid side chain is buried inside, and when you cleave it, you expose that, and so we get covalent attachments to a surface of the C3b and C4b proteins. And the small pieces function as inflammation mediators, and then we have the membrane attack proteins that form that big pore structure. This slide, this is just a repeat pretty much of what we're just talking about. But here I'll say a little bit more. We'll come back to this. Let's see here. How the lectin pathway gets turned on as part of the innate immune response. And the alternative pathway here is an amplifying pathway for both of these here. So, if you get an infection, macrophages at the site of infection will start engulfing the bacteria, and the macrophages then start sending out inflammatory cytokines, TNF alpha, IL-1, IL-6. These get into the circulation, and when they arrive in the liver, they cause the liver, especially I think IL-6, causes, forget that. The liver, in response to these cytokines, will secrete what are called acute phase proteins, which includes a protein called mannose binding protein. And mannose binding protein resembles the C1 component of the classical pathway, and so that then activates the so-called lectin pathway. And then later on we'll talk more about this amplifying the so-called alternative pathway. We'll come to that pretty shortly. Okay, so here's a picture of the C1 component of complement. The C1q protein is shown here in yellow. So it's sort of hexapod or tetrapod-like structure. And it has these associated proteins, the R and S subunits. We have a pair of C1R and a pair of C1S. Little feet on this structure have a certain shape all by itself. If these feet encounter IgM, so here's IgM. Now IgM, this is a pentamer, you remember, and the tail and the arms are all pretty much in the same plane as it's circulating. But when it binds to its antigenic epitopes here, we form a so-called staple form here, where we bend right here between the tail and the arms, and that bent form like this forms when it interacts with antigen, and now that C1q recognizes the bent form here, and it binds right at the bend in the IgM molecules like this. Okay. So the staple form of IgM, which is going to be found on the surface of the bacteria typically, is the way to activate the complement C1q component that's shown here. If you have closely spaced antigen, and we have then two closely spaced immunoglobulin G molecules, that will do. Not as effective as IgM, but this will do to activate the complement, the C1q component of complement. So, go back to where we were at the previous page here. After binding C1q to the antibody, okay, C1R, and so the C1q will change its shape when it binds to the staple form of IgM. That shape change activates the intrinsic protease activity of the R subunits. They cleave themselves, thereby activating themselves, and then they go ahead and cleave the S components as well. And then the S components, they start the next step in the pathway. The C1S things are a protease, and they cleave circulating C4 protein and circulating C2 protein, and form the C4b big piece and C2b big piece. Okay. Let's take a look here. Okay. here's the C1Q, fine, in this case, the two pair of here is C4, polo, polo attack C4, and here's where we're going to cleave, and inside of here is this highly reactive thioester molecule that we're going to talk about. So C1S cleaves C4 to a small piece C4A and a big piece C4B. The big piece C4B has this internal so-called thioester, it's a strange linkage. They're actually wrapped with water almost immediately. And in fact, there is some tickle where the water will diffuse in and break that bond, open up that bond. But most of it survives and so that when we cleave it, we expose this highly reactive thioester, and then any nucleophile, like any amino acid, or any that's some chemistry, you know what I mean by a nucleophile. Even water molecules or hydroxyl-glucose. So this can react with water still, but it will often react with nucleophilic proteins and so forth on the surface of a bacterial cell or our own cells and form a covalent bond. Here. So if it reacts with water, this just becomes a carboxyl group. If it reacts with a nucleophile, this would be like an acid bond. Here's this sort of activity. So C4B is covalently bound to proteins on the cell surface. So we convert C4 to reactive C4B, which covalently attacks the surface of the bacterium. And then we also take C2 and cleave that to form, oh, here's the one, okay? Here's the case where C2, the cleavage product, is referred to in this picture as C2A, and the small piece says C2B. That goes because, again, the general rule I was telling you about. So here's the big piece. And I think the current edition of your book, we've gone back to the ancient terminology. I think the first time we named it, this piece being called C2A. But I often might be referring to it as C2B because it's the big piece, okay? B for big. Anyway, it's a protease, okay? So this big piece here is now activated to cleave a partner target protein called C3. So first we took, so C4 cleaved C2 to make C2B, and then C2B cleaves C3, and now that exposes the highly reactive thioester in here, and then C3B starts covalently attaching the targets to the surface of cells. I wrote down here in other books and earlier editions of our book, this big piece was named in standard convention nowadays as C2B. Okay, this pair of proteins right here, C4B paired with the C2 fragment, this is called classical C3 convertase because it converts C3 to C3B. Okay. Now, there is an alternative C3 convertase we're going to talk about. So this is classical C2, C4. Now, once some C3B, once we're forming C3B by the classical C3 convertase, C2, C4. Now C3B, in addition to oxidizing the surface of the bacteria, C3B can react with another complement component called factor B. Okay. Factor B binds to C3B and thereby changes its shape in a way that now attracts the attention of factor D. Okay, factor D is now going to cleave factor B. Having fun? Here is that factor D is released. So factor D is acted catalytically to cleave factor B, and we produce a big piece here, BB, and then we produce a small piece, BA. Okay. So now this C3B, BB, is is an alternative C3 convertase. So we produce this with classical C3 convertase, and now this piece can get turned into alternative C3 convertase. And this turns out to be an amplifying mechanism to really start producing a lot of C3b all over the surface of the bacterial cells. And this is reminiscent of another one. Remember we talked at the very beginning about the three pathways that can lead to the activation of complement. One of those three pathways is this so-called alternative pathway here. And here, I told you that the C3 has this buried thioester, reactive thioester structure. I said that sometimes water can leak into the interior and react with that thioester. Okay? When it does, we hydrolyze the thioester, and we speak to this. We call this. It's not cleaved, but it's because we hydrolyze the thioester. It has certain properties now that make it able to bind factor B as if it had been cleaved and had become covalently attached to something. So there's a constant what's called kickover. So circulating C3 is over time slowly reacting with water from your blood plasma, becoming IC3, which can now react with factor B, just as we were talking about up here, and then factor B gets recruited, and now we make soluble C3 IC3B analogous to the membrane-bound C3BB here. And this stuff will then start working in the circulation in the blood to convert and activate C3 to C3b, which will then just be reacting with everything all around as fast as it can. So, in summary, there are two types of C3 convertase, similar structure and function. The classical C3 convertase, C4C2, and the alternative convertase, C3BBB. Okay? And they both take circulating C3 component, cleave it, and produce highly reactive C3b pieces that are binding to the surface of all surfaces around it, host cell surfaces, bacterial surfaces, everything. And this sort of it kind of shows the amplifying effect of the alternative pathway here. So here's looking from above. Here's the C1q attaching to an IgM on the surface of a bacterium. And then we get cleavage and deposition of the C4b protein here. Okay. And then we get then conversion, we get creation of the classical convertase here, and we start making some C3b here, okay, and then this C3b here reacts with factors B and D, and we get alternative C3 convertase, and it then just starts really producing C3b all over the radius around the IgM molecule. And so, as we said before, phagocytic cells, like round cells, they have C3b receptors. It's complement receptor 1, CR1. It's on this, and they have receptors for C3b. And so that if we have, let's say here, bacteria here, and their antibodies binding them, and then we're activating complement, and we're then producing C3b all over the surface of the bacteria, okay? And then the C3b receptors here, they bind the tail, and they bind the C3b protein, and that then leads to the phagocytosis, the endocytosis of the phagocytized bacteria. Okay? And, certain bacteria, especially ones with mucus polysaccharide coats and so forth, are much more efficiently engulfed when they're coated with both antibody and C3b. Okay. these cells express receptors for C3b or for the further cleavage products of C3b, IC3b, C3e, CBG. And here's some stuff here, not on the test. Okay, just know that there are many different kinds of complement receptors here, expressed by different cell types and blah, blah, blah. Now, it turns out that red blood cells have complement receptors on their surface. And here's an antigen-antibody complex here. Here, if you have the right ratio of antigen to antibody just in solution, you can get one arm of the antibody binding one antigen, the next arm of the antibody binding a second antigen, shared by this arm, and so we get polymeric antigen-antibody complexes like this form. C1q can bind to these and activate complement, so now we get complement tagging of these immune complexes. We need to get rid of these immune complexes when they form in the blood, because when they come into the kidneys, they can clog up the filtering apparatus of the kidney. So, there are myeloma is a cancer that it produces billions of these cells, and they're all secreting an antibody, and you get all kinds of immune antibody complexes just for clogging things up. So anyway, these complement tagging complexes, red blood cells can carry them away to get rid of them. Red blood cells have complement receptors on them that will bind to the complement in these large immune complexes. And then when the red blood cells pass through the spleen and liver, there are macrophages, resident macrophages there in the capillaries that grab these complement tagging complexes, essentially pull them off of the red blood cell by the receptors of the macrophage, and then engulf and destroy these large immune complex precipitates. Patients with autoimmune disease like lupus are at risk for kidney failure because you really kind of overwhelm this whole immune complex clearing pathway. Now let's go on and talk about the fact that the complement system can punch holes in bacterial cells and so forth. So here is our classical C5 convertase. Where did that come from? Well, we had the classical C3 convertase, which is C2, C4, and some of the C3b that's being produced here doesn't covalently attach. It associates with the C4b complex side by side like this. Okay, and now this C2, C4, C3b complex here, now called classical C5 convertase, you grab C5, and then C2 here can cleave C5 to C5b and a small piece. Okay. Now C5b can proceed now to initiate pore formation, as we'll show in the next slide. We can also get the same happening with the alternative C5 convertase, where we start with alternative C3 convertase here, which is C3bb. And again, we produce some C3b that doesn't immediately react with the cell surface, but somehow gets trapped by binding side by side with this C3b. Okay. Now again, this can grab C5 and cleave C5 to a big C5 piece and a small C5 piece here. Okay. So just like we have classical and alternative C3 convertases, they can both react with the product C3b in a different way, sort of binding, to become classical C5 convertase or alternative C5 convertase, which will cleave C5. Now, C5 here, it doesn't have that buried bioester, but it's activated to combine with the next partner proteins to form the pore formation. is so here's the C5, and we converted to the cleave to C5b. It now reacts with C6 and C7. Here we are, C5, flanked by C6 and C7. C7, when it joins the complex, it exposes a hydrophobic domain here. So C7. So C7 now integrates into the, partially integrates into the membrane phospholipid bilayer. And now we recruit C8, which goes right through the phospholipid bilayer. And so now we have what is it? C5, 6, 7, 8. And now we start, and they're inserted now into the lipid bilayer. And now we recruit a whole bunch of these C9s, and they then assemble side by side to form this large pore. Here you can see that these pores in the electron microscope. It's a large diameter pore. The whole proteins can pass through that pore. Okay? And that causes simply the osmotic lysis of the bacteria. So, in terms of preparation for the last exam, just know that starting with C5, these C9 pores can be produced, and the C9 pores resemble perforin and create very large holes in the cell membranes. I'll pause while you write that down. I should say C9 rings. C9 rings can be produced, and these C9 rings resemble C9 resemble perforin oligomers are one big thing, and so does C9. Okay. Now, the small pieces, a word about the small pieces here. So, so local inflammatory responses are induced by the small cleavage fragments, C3a, C4a, and especially C5a. Okay? And these things cause the capillary cells to kind of shrink a little bit. Possibilities for plasma to leak out of the blood into the tissue to get swelling and all the other kinds of consequences of inflammation. Okay? And of course, they also recruit the macrophages and the neutrophils and so forth to start fighting the. So these peptides here are called anaphylatoxins. Okay? And they can cause anaphylaxis. You know, if you have a peanut allergy, someone puts peanut powder in the salad, your face will swell and you'll go into an anaphylactic shock, for example. So these peptides do good work, but in pathological situations, they produce an acute systemic inflammatory response, an anaphylactic shock. Okay, now then, I've been emphasizing that when you form the C3 convertase complex and start tagging everything in sight with C3b pieces, okay, that certainly they're going to land on immune complexes, they're going to land on the surface of bacteria or virus particles, but they're also going to land on your vascular endothelial cells, on your blood vessels and everything else. And so our own cells have ways of well, for one thing, the complement cascade, it's almost like my father was a younger guy who was working for DuPont, and during the war he did a little bit of work in sort of synthesis of explosives or what was going on there. And they had, on the plant, they had this storage facility loaded with, high explosives, No smoking inside that depot. So do not light a match inside that depot. Well, complement is a little bit like lighting a match in that depot. It can get out of hand real fast. It's just self-amplifying. And so it's got to be dampened down. You start it, and or like a sort of a feeder reactor for generating atomic energy, electricity, and so forth. You have these neutron rods that will sort of dampen down the reaction. So we have a number of things. So for example, we activate C1Q, okay, and then we control it in various ways. So I guess I'll read this up. Complement is a powerful weapon against infection that self-amplifies, easily get out of hand and damage the host. There exist dampening mechanisms to control it, and there are two kinds of these here. Dampening proteins that live in the blood, so-called serum proteins here, and then membrane proteins that will dampen it down. And so one of the most important controllers of the classical pathway is a plasma protein called the C1 inhibitor, C1NH. Here's C1NH. C1NH limits the time that C1 molecules remain active by irreversibly binding and activating the protease C1R and C1S. Okay. So here's we formed it. We're starting to cleave things here, but then C1H comes along and peels off these R and S subunits, and now this is just a shell of its former self, and we're no longer cleaving C2 and C4. We also have another serum protein called C4 binding protein, okay, and we have a protein called factor H. So here is the classical C3 convertase, C2 and C4, and it's going to be converting C3 to C3b. But along comes C4 binding protein. It binds to C4, okay, makes a conformational change in C4, so it releases C2, okay, and then factor I comes in here, and it cleaves C4. So we release a big piece of C4, and we also then release C4b and I, and we're left with a dead piece of just C4d here. In a similar way, we have now the alternative C4 convertase, the amplifying guy, and it's going to be busily cleaving C3 like crazy. Along comes factor H. Okay, factor H is going to bind to C3b, causing the displacement of BB. Okay, and now factor H here will recruit factor I again, and factor I will now in this case cleave C3b, and we're left with an IC3b's, and this little cleaved off piece of C3b, and of course we release the I and the H components. So both of these ways are blood. This is a blood protein. These are both, blood proteins here that control. We initiate these C3 convertases and are making C3b and coding it like crazy, and we shut that down. Okay. Now it says here that these two proteins, C4b and factor H, are somehow preferentially recruited to or stabilized on host cell surfaces, whereas C3 convertases and or C3 so they're protecting the host cell, they're less effectively, or they're not acting on these things on bacterial cell surfaces. Very convenient. Okay. Now, that was all about blood proteins that dampen down the complement thing. Now let's talk about cell surface proteins that can dampen down the complement response. So membrane protein is called decay accelerating factor, DAF, and membrane cofactor protein, MC, this is a typo, that should be MCP as in Paul, are found on all host cell surfaces. Let's take a look at DAF. Okay. So all our cells have DAF on their surface, and here we have some C3 convertase that somehow got C3b landed on one of our own host cell surfaces. It grabbed B, and now we have a C3 convertase here. But along comes DAF, and before we can make very much C3b bound to things. That will cause the release of the B component, and that's the end of the story there. For C3 conversion. Similarly with this membrane cofactor protein here, we have C3bBB. MCP will come over here, bind this, it makes a conformational change, and then all the factor I comes along, cleaves the C3b, and thereby inactivates C3b. So BB is gone, and C3b is not going to be recruiting anymore than factor B. Okay. By the way, it turns out that complement receptor number 1, which we find in macrophages and so forth, can also have the same function of inactivating this stuff. Complement one can act like MCP. Okay. But now, here, yet one more thing here. These big C9 hole punching pore structures, we don't want them forming on our own host cells. Okay? And our cells express a membrane protein called CD59. Okay? And CD59 intercepts the process here just when we're about to start recruiting C9. And these guys right here can't get C9 because CD59 binds to them and changes their shape and prevents the polymerization of the C9 pore structure. And CD59 is also known as protectin. And I think you're going to be disappointed when I tell you we're going to stop 50 minutes short here. We're done. Have a nice weekend.